Hi, and welcome to the Virtual Coach Advantage podcast from Springboard Future. I'm Emma Calvert, co-founder and coach at Springboard Future and our podcast host. And joining me today is Neela Bettridge, our master coach and co-founder. On our last podcast, Neela and I talked about why you need to know your purpose. And this is part 2 of that podcast. And today we're going to be digging into why purpose is so important to the team and your organisations. So Neela, in our last podcast, we talked about why as individuals it's so important that we understand our purpose and what it does for us. But today I want to take it to another level and I want to talk about the team and why every team needs to be anchored in their purpose.
Yes, thank you for that. And last time we talked a lot about individual purpose and it's linked to values and it's linked to resilience. But this is as pertinent to a team. Actually, what has really jumped out at me this year is that the teams that have had very clear purpose that they actually believe in, have actually navigated this time better than the teams that haven't been clear on purpose. So it really is quite interesting. And also this piece around happiness in those teams. Yes, it's been tough. I don't know a team that it hasn't been tough. I think they would be probably lying if it said that it hasn't been tough. But what I've noticed is that they're clear on purpose, but they also allow time for each other and allow time to communicate. And that very much, I think, is linked into the happiness of a team. I don't think enough is said about happiness of teams. And it's really important. And you know, when you work with a team, when you go in, you feel the vibe sometimes. Sometimes it's scratchy. Sometimes there's a lack of trust. And then there's other teams where they are dealing with difficult stuff. But because they're clear, there's just a way of being, a way of working that feels much more comfortable. And I always sense it when I work with people.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about it needing to be clear. What is it that as individuals in a team we're wanting? Or, so we've got this clear vision, but what is it that we need to really be anchored in the purpose?
We have to believe in it. It's particularly, I think any team needs to believe in their purpose and it's got to be clear. I often work with teams where it's very wordy. It doesn't emotionally connect. And then the people who actually work within those teams that have to deliver the work don't really believe it. And in addition, some of the behaviours that are being shown by people who are more senior don't live it out, whatever that purpose may be. And the more things are tough, the more important being clear about purpose, clarity of purpose, and getting buy-in from your team is absolutely critical. I think you can kind of get away with it when the times are good, but you definitely can't when the times are tough.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, isn't there, about living it? And as a manager and a leader, living what your purpose is. I often go into corporates and I see big, shiny, mission statements, values, purpose, whatever you want to call it, on the walls, but the behaviors aren't necessarily matching it either.
Exactly. And that, I think, is when organizations get into really odd waters, really, because there is an undercurrent and an underculture which is going on. So everything looks really marvelous. But actually, if you scratch underneath the surface, it's not marvelous because the behaviors don't back it up. And this often comes right from the top. This has to be demonstrated from the top down. And it has to be very, very clear, this kind of stuff. And it has to be linked into appraisals and what's acceptable and not acceptable in an organization.
Yeah, let's come back to, if we can, the individual and the need to contribute and see how we are contributing to that purpose. What are your thoughts on that, Neela? Because often that can be quite difficult for some people who are lower down in the organisation to see that the job that they show up doing every day actually contributes to the purpose of the organisation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Emma. What we all need, every single one of us, is to feel fulfilled at work. And I'd say to any managers or leaders listening to this, if you want to improve employee engagement, performance, innovation, focus on the purpose. Focus on helping your people connect to the purpose. And it will also keep you focused, particularly in this world currently where everything is changing, everything. And remembering your purpose as a leader and staying anchored to it will help the company stay focused as well and enable engagement of your people. I think companies with clear purpose, leaders with clear purpose, end up with very, very good employee survey scores because people actually buy into the purpose, they buy into the leadership, they understand their part in it, and they vote with their feet, basically.
Yeah, and essentially what you're talking about there, aside from employee engagement, Neela, is high purpose, high performance environments. And actually, as you were talking, Daniel Coyle's book, The Culture Code, which I highly recommend to any leader, that came into my mind. And actually, you know, what Daniel talks about is that high purpose environments just don't happen. They just don't come from on high. They're actually from the ground up, and it's the group that really navigates the problems together and makes the team move forward to meet those challenges. I think it's a great book for people to read.
Yeah, well, firstly, that is a great book, Emma, and I recommend it to anyone who's interested in culture and creating high performing teams. And the quote you've pulled out is absolutely right, Emma. It isn't about telling people what their purpose in a company and team is, it's about co creation. And also, co creation is one of the most important things to enable in terms of employee engagement and getting people to feel part of something. How do you get people to connect to it? How do you get people to own it? I mean, that actually is really important. So just making this really practical. If I was a manager wanting to create a purpose-driven team, I would suggest doing a couple of things. I would go back to, the Ikigai model and get your whole team to do this. So they're getting clarity on their own purpose and then bringing it together with the why, how, and what, i.e. Sinex, why, how, and what. I love it because it's so simple. Get your team working with you with an away day or a brainstorm or whatever it is that you need to do to really interrogate these three questions. It could also be an awful lot of fun. So there are two models here, which I think could be very helpful to any leader listening to this to use with their teams in development of purpose.
Yeah, that's great. I use both of those actually as well when I'm doing this work with teams, and they work absolutely beautifully. Nina, I mentioned earlier about I go into a lot of companies and see they've got purpose, vision statements. But do we need those at a team level? Do you think it's useful to teams?
Yes, I do actually. They can be helpful as they're easy to remember and they also keep people really focused on what it is that they need to be doing, particularly when the going gets tough. It's also something that everybody can rally round, but they also need to be meaningful. And the language needs to be simple and that people can really understand and buy into. What I really do not like is overarching vision statements that actually don't say anything. So, for example, if you look at TED, its purpose statement is spread ideas. It's so simple, it's so emotive, but everybody understands it. And that is what I think is useful to teams and departments and organizations. So, from that point of view, the purpose and vision statement for a team is incredibly helpful.
I think it's the point we're trying to make here as well is that you do have to take the time. This isn't something that happens just by osmosis. This is something that you've actually got to set time aside to do. And I would say at any level in the organization, the guys at the top will be setting the purpose and the strategy. But wherever you are in the organization as a manager, you've got to take the time to do that work with your team and how they as a team and individually connect to it. Isn't that right, Nina?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's all about the time and it's preparation and thinking about it and making it important. When we're all caught up in the day to day, thousands of emails, countless Zoom meetings, and various other things, purpose can get very, very low on the agenda. And you might be able to get away with that for about 6 or 7 months. But it's interesting. In the last week, I've been talking to quite a few leaders who I'm working with their teams, and they have been telling me that actually the lack of the link with purpose is now starting to cause a problem. And they really need to get people back on track and allowing time for planning, for thinking, for all of that stuff which goes with purpose.
Yeah, I'm also sort of having a reflection here, Neela, on how life has changed, not just in the last year, but also generationally. So, I don't know about you, but when I started work, I'm not going to tell our listeners when, it was a long time ago, we weren't necessarily a purpose led kind of culture. But what I'm seeing from younger people than me coming through, that actually, as they started to work, their place in the world mattered to them. Their contribution in the world mattered to them. And it wasn't about being seen in the office necessarily doing, long hours. And I think there's definitely a connection here on an individual basis, but also just environmentally, culturally, how we're all changing.
I think that's so true. I mean, I suspect I'm sort of around when you started work. And for me, I can remember I was just so thrilled to get a job. I didn't think about sustainability or purpose or anything else when I first started. But certainly the younger generations that I notice, it is really important for them to have purpose, to understand the sustainability. Some of the growth organizations that we're involved in and the development of tech, they are including things like ESG in the way that they are innovating, in the way that they're developing products, in the way that they're dealing with investment. And I think this is a really interesting move. These are the new entrepreneurs of the world. They're coming through and they're incorporating, and purpose is very important. And boy, we're going to need it to solve some of the big social, ethical, environmental issues which we are facing. So I welcome it. I think it's really great.
I do. I felt like we were going to end on a really serious note there, Neela, but you turned it around at the last minute. So yes, we think purpose is really important and we all need it. What a great way to end the episode and indeed the season. We're going to be back in the autumn with a brand new season. So do get in contact with us with any feedback, any comments you've got, and requests for topics, because we'll be planning it over the summer holidays. So don't forget, you can follow us on our website, springboardfuture.com, LinkedIn or Twitter. Thanks for joining the Virtual Coach Advantage podcast. We hope to coach you again soon.